To a boring old history lesson is purely coincidental.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today, in honor of Black History Month, we are bringing you again the story of an OG, Sojourner Truth, who has often been so very misrepresented by both her contemporaries and those that came after her.
This episode is from 2017. And like in life, when we know better, we do better. You're going to hear us use the term slave and the term master. Now, in 2025, we would not use those terms. We would use enslaved and enslaver. It puts the people on the same level of humanity, except one group is having horrific treatment done to them against their will, and the other is consciously making a decision to do that treatment to another human being. And we also talk about our boys who were 12 at the time and now they're 20, and life is about change, isn't it? And now, without further ado, on with the show.
Sojourner Truth is most famous for her women's rights speech entitled Ain't I a Woman? There's a certain irony in the fact that most of what everyone knows about her is just not the truth at all. The end. Let's talk about Sojourner Truth.
But first, let's drop her into history. In 1851, Rigoletto premiered in Venice. Moby Dick and the New York Times were first published. The refrigeration machine, the telescope, the Yale lock, and the sewing machine were all patented. A fire destroyed 35,000 volumes in the U.S. Library of Congress, and another one destroyed 1/4 of San Francisco. The first America's Cup sailing race was held in the waters off the Isle of Wight. Mary Shelley and James Audubon both died. And on May 29th, 1851, a formerly enslaved woman named Sojourner Truth gave a speech at a women's rights convention that's still being discussed today.
Isabella Hardenberg, who at the time of her birth was most likely just called Hardenberg's Isabella, was born sometime in 1797 in Hurley, New York, a town about 90 miles north of New York City. She was the 11th child of James Baumfree and Betsy, who were an enslaved couple owned by Colonel Johannes Hardenberg. You're like, New York. I thought slavery was the Deep South. Don't we all have that picture? You know, Gone with the Wind, we've all seen it. Cotton plantations, the Civil War. Well, when Isabella, her parents called her Belle. So can we?
I hope so, because that's what I wrote in my notes.
Okay. So when Belle was born, there were actually two northern states that still allowed slavery, New York and New Jersey. New York, once New Amsterdam. That's New York City to you and me, had been a major slave market only 100 years ago from here. So Belle's papa himself had been stolen from Ghana. He is literally a first generation slave. Her mother was the daughter of people who had been stolen from Guinea. So it's a much, much more recent tie to Africa than most of the other people we talk about.
Yeah, and you don't think about the North having that many slaves because it wasn't dependent economically on having them. You know, the cost of their operations didn't matter. They used them mostly for domestic help and help on their farms. So the number of slaves that they owned was less, but, you know, it doesn't matter. You own one, you might as well own 100.
You know, the fight against slavery actually had begun right after the Revolutionary War. We just don't talk about this in history. You don't learn about this. Abolitionists had been fighting to put the removal of slavery into the Bill of Rights, blocked by mostly rich landowners. Like Susan said, for economic reasons, of course. It seems like what it always is. Well, let each state decide ended up being the Revolutionary War position. Because you know what? They're only loosely gathered together as a country anyway, and you don't want to make people mad and leave the group, right? So, okay, fair enough. In order to stay together as a group against Britain, who we just left, we're going to let each state decide on this one. But all over the North, activists, mostly Quakers, so 10 points for the Quakers, were chipping away at slavery. So chipping away, legislation here, pressure there. And so within the 20 years following the Revolutionary War, they had succeeded in whittling its influence down north of Maryland. So we just have the two states left that still have legal slavery. It's still these major Dutch landowners, though, like Colonel Hardenberg, owner of Bell, that were opposing progress. And in the South, you can just forget it in the South because the cotton gin had just been invented. And you know what that means. Cotton became king. These planters needed a lot of labor. The South was hardening up on all this free labor. Can you see the seeds of the Civil War here? Because I sure can.
Oh, yeah. And it's not that far off from the Revolutionary War. We're talking 1797.
Let's go back to New York. Let's join our story. James, who was always called bum-free, which means a free tree, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was implied that because he was very tall and very strong, and he reminded people of a tree trunk, of a tree. He looked like that. So they called him the Dutch word for tree, and it changed into bomb free.
Okay. Well,
which is so ironic that they added the free to the tree.
Well, and then Mama Bet, as Mama was called, had been given a little house on the ground. So they plant a little garden. And so you think, well, maybe this is going to be, the whole benevolent owner story, the idealized, oh, we're just a big happy family story. Bomfrey had lost two previous wives, and I'm not sure how many children, to them being sold away from him. That is not domestic bliss. Mama Bet herself had given birth to 10 children before Belle.
She only had one of those siblings living at home still, her brother Peter, who was the youngest boy in the family. All the rest had been sold off by Colonel Hardenberg.
This is where the narratives diverge because Belle may have been the only child in the house when she was born. So either Peter is older or younger, and no one really knows for sure exactly. He appears after her in Charles Hardenberg's inventory.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't necessarily matter. There's no sense of security if you're older or younger. So we don't know, in fact, what happened to most of Belle's brothers and sisters. Did they die? Some were sold. But I do want to tell you one story. This is a story that Bomfrey and Mama told Belle often as a young child. And I wonder if it's to prepare her for the inevitable separation. That's all I can think.
Well, after you've survived your children being stolen and sold away from you, you learn to harden yourself maybe a little bit, totally preparing her for it. So Mama Bet would tell Belle stories about her other children, specifically one about a brother named Michael. It's so heartbreaking. He was about 5 years old when a sleigh pulled up in the front of the house. He saw his sister be carried out of the house in a box and put in the sleigh, and he realized that that was going to be his fate as well. So he ran back into the house and tried to hide, but unfortunately he couldn't. He was pulled out kicking and screaming and put on the sleigh and taken away and never seen again.
The strange white man with the fancy horse that was so exciting to see turned out to be a terrifying monster. He just walked right in the house, pulled Michael out, and took him away, which is kidnapping, obviously, in any other time and place. From here, the fact is the children had been sold, and there is nothing Mama Bet and Bomfrey could do. Imagine that. I mean, if you have children or grandchildren, imagine a stranger coming into your house, picking them up, and society thinking that was okay. Not only is there no one to tell, everyone's going to look at you like, and?
Mm-hmm.
Your tears are thought to be ridiculous if you're the mother of these children, even punishable by a beating. And this is not the first or the second or the fifth child you'd lost this way, and then you have another baby. It's just, I can't even process this.
No. I mean, the feeling, I'm not defending this at all. The feeling was that the slaves and, Black people they weren't a whole person, that they didn't have the same type of emotional connection to their family. They really did look at them almost like livestock. And it's as horrifying as that is, that's what they told themselves to justify this kind of action. Which
is sort of ridiculous if they're farmers, because if you take a calf away from a cow, both sides of that equation are real sad.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, moving on from that. She told her other stories. That's just the most illustrative one I can get to about what's been happening to this family for years and years. So a few things happened when Belle was around 2 years old. New York State passed a law, and it took effect on July 4th, 1799. So anyone born into slavery on or about that date was to be freed at the age of 28 for men and 25 for women. She just missed the cutoff. That's a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
This was sort of a compromise. The Quakers were at it again, and the abolitionists that weren't Quakers. Sort of a compromise that had to be agreed upon in order to push ultimately the end of slavery in New York. So the realists among them realize that gradual reduction of the labor force is going to be the only way they're going to get people to agree to it. So the second thing that happened was Master Johannes Hardenberg died, and his son Charles inherited his father's estate. And he didn't want to live there. He just built this big, grand new mansion. And so the livestock and all the slaves were transported to the new place. And this is how low these human beings were regarded. There are no cozy little houses at the new place. You know, goodbye garden, goodbye any pretense of family life. 12 people were forced to live in the cellar.
Yeah, the only light came in from very thin windows. There was a dirt floor with wood planks put on it. But still, when it rained, that floor is going to get wet. I grew up in a house like this. It was built actually about this time. And the cellar, it had a certain smell. It was always musty. When it rained, we actually had a little creek that ran through our cellar. And that's what this family is growing up in. And they're all in this dark, dank place, and that's their home.
And the family actually was able to stay together. And I'm sad to say that is a super low bar.
Yeah.
For a period of about 7 years, the family worked in the house and on the land and were able to stay together. Mama missed her other children so dreadfully and told Belle and Peter all about them. I think to have her children, Belle and Peter, bear witness, I guess, to these children, so they stayed in the family, in the hearts of the family. Does that make sense? It seems like a long shot to ever think they would ever meet again.
Well, yeah, Belle never learned to read or write, so they couldn't write down their stories at all. And it's just oral traditions. And I think that's what Mama Bet was doing. She would talk about the stars at night and how she looks to them and knows that there's a God up there looking down on them and looking down on all of her children. Those are the same stars that they were looking at. She was kind of giving that Belle and Peter a way to kind of deal with the emotions of the situation.
Like maybe putting into their minds that when inevitably you go away from me, all you have to do is look up at the stars and know that I am looking up at those same stars thinking about you. That makes me feel pretty sad.
I know.
I don't know why that got me so much. That really makes me feel upset.
Oh, no, you can cry.
Well, and I just think it wouldn't be human if that didn't make you feel upset, I guess. I don't know.
No, yes, you're right. I'm not crying, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make me upset to think about it. And yeah, I mean, I send my kid to college and I'm a mess, and he's just an hour and a half away. So, and I know I'll be seeing him in his laundry.
There's no good news here. The inevitable happened. When Belle was around 9 years old, Charles Hardenberg died. Mama and Bomfrey tried to prepare their children for separation, and they said all they could. They gave them all the rules they'd need for survival around white people, namely, wear a mask at all times, don't show emotion, just be obedient, and trust to God, because He is going to be the steadfast friend that can travel with you when I can't. So the heirs didn't want Bomfrey. He was an old man, considerably older than his wife, living in the cellar, had aggrieved a lot of medical conditions.
They wanted to do something with him. So what they did is they freed him, and they let Betsy also become freed so she could take care of James.
This might sound benevolent, but I don't think it was. The state of New York had passed a law that no one could free a slave unless you gave them, I think, posted a bond of about $200 when you did it, or if you could prove they had a way or a person to take care of them. Because slave owners had just been turning out old slaves willy-nilly when they were no longer useful. That's pretty cruel. You would not do that to actual livestock, would you? The absolute minimum humanitarian thing they could do, really. And still the heirs found a way around it. That's why they freed Mama, too, because that's the loophole. You take care of them. And now I ask you, what were they supposed to do? They had nowhere to go. They had no skills. The fear must have been extreme. And they begged. They begged to stay. They begged for mercy, is how I read it. And the heirs let that go a while and then said they could stay in the cellar as long as they continued to serve the family. But now that they were technically free, we can just throw you out at any time. Also, you have to buy your own food and clothing. People are dirtbags. I could not come to grips with it.
They were going to sell Peter and Belle all along. And that's exactly what they did. 9-year-old Belle was put on the auction block. And to make her more attractive for people to purchase, she went with a herd of sheep for $100. which is less than $2,000 in 2017. I'm
So
sorry, that's the one that's getting me. Oh, we're going to be a mess by the end of this thing. Yeah, I can't. The terror, her mom had been telling her these stories all along that couldn't even start to prepare her for that. And the terror and the fright. Now, I don't even know if we've mentioned this before, but the Hardenbergs spoke Dutch. So their slaves spoke Dutch. It was the only language that they knew. So she's in this world where there's all this stuff going on around her and she can't understand it.
So her new master, a storekeeper named John Neely, who was an Englishman, sort of realized that there is a major flaw in his new purchase, right? As far as he's concerned. I mean, where would Belle have ever been exposed to English, I ask you? And Mrs. Neely was full of rage about this. I mean, she communicated with Belle like the stereotypical American in films, like maybe if you scream it louder, saucepan, like this is a broom. It's not going to work. And Mrs. Neely would slap her right across the face when she didn't understand something, which I can tell you is not a very recognized method of language education.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And she was their only slave. So they thought they had someone to do all their domestic work, and she couldn't even understand their commands.
The Neelys were having a hard time in their business. Their store wasn't boycotted by the Dutch population exactly, but why would you go to an English shop if one of your own is available, kind of? And so Mrs. Neely was kind of enraged at the Dutch people. And so here's this hot coals of fire every time her servant says one word of Dutch, and there's nothing stopping you from taking out all your anger on this little 9-year-old girl. So Belle later described this period of her life as war. She would try anything, like she tried to kind of pre-clean, pre-do anything to do ahead to stave off the abuse. It doesn't work. They just take advantage. I don't know. One day she was sent to the barn and Mr. Neely ripped the shirt off her back and beat her until she fainted with metal rods he'd tied together and heated in the fire. And she is 11 years old at the time of this beating.
Okay, you got me again. It's probably the mother in us, right?
Mm-hmm. Not long afterward, along comes Bomfrey for a visit. He can't help noticing that his child is standing in the snow with no shoes on, that she's shivering in the cold with no warm clothes, and definitely the spirit's knocked out of her. But it's not until he gave her a hug when he was about to go, and she shrieked, and then he saw her back. Did his head hang down? His poor daughter. I mean, his poor daughter, what could he even do? He's free, but what power does he have? And he promised he would help her, and I do not know how he did it. I don't know. But along comes a local tavern owner named Martin Shriver, and he's sort of a roughneck individual, I would say, kind of hard in the way, like think of ye old England barkeep. Like a guy that would throw a glass at your head and tell you to get out of his tavern. I think he had a sideline as a fisherman with a vocabulary to match.
Yeah, exactly. So you're combining two kind of rough, stereotypical, occupations.
Well, and his wife matched him. They were peas in a pod. And all of this, when I was reading it, I was like, Bomfrey, what are you thinking? I was super nervous about this. Like, I almost bit my nails off. This guy who really doesn't even believe in slavery, really. He bought Belle from her abusers for $5 more than they'd spent, and I don't think he got the sheep with either. You know what? They taught her to speak English, this couple. She had plenty of nutritious food. She had shoes. She had warm clothes. And a safe place, a comfortable place to sleep. Not a fancy place, but she worked behind the bar and picked up quite a vocabulary of swear words.
She also, she helped out. She learned how to make beer. She learned how to fish. She ran errands. The family was rough around the edges, but they were very kind. They treated her like a human being, which she never really had.
Well, she started smoking a pipe. But if that's the worst thing, you know what? Hooray.
That's right.
She was actually better off here physically than she'd ever been in her life. Now, emotionally, yeah, that's a whole other thing. She's still not free. And Mama had worked herself to death. Literally worked herself to death, trying to keep herself and her husband fed. She had slipped into a coma and died in the night. And now her old, weak, nearly blind Papa was in a desperate situation. The family shunted him angrily between the heirs' houses. Sometimes he had to walk 5 or 10 miles to get to his new temporary home, and Belle couldn't help him. Pomfrey was farmed out to this other couple to take care of another loophole situation of older slaves basically being thrown out into the world. And one by one, the caretakers died, and Pomfrey starved to death all alone, and Belle never
Mhm.
found out until it was too late. Almost 2 years passed in the tavern, and all that good food must have worked its magic, because in that short time between 11 and 13, Belle grew to almost 6 feet tall. At
Mhm.
13!
I know.
Jen has a friend like that. Like, you saw him in 5th grade, and everybody was the same height, and now you're like, who is this man?
That's the age when they just shoot up and they start to look like adults. I'm watching my baby go through it. You are too.
Not as much as, I mean, your son's gotten very tall.
He has, which is kind of funny since I am very short. He surpassed me. I think he was what, 10?
It's not like we're giantesses. Well, I don't know what's going to happen because my husband did not. Okay, between the summer between, gosh, I want to say sophomore and junior year, like he left a small nondescript boy and then he worked bucking hay all summer in the hot, hot sun and grew like 14 inches. And when he got back, it was like, who's the new guy?
Yeah, your husband's very tall.
Yes,
So I don't know.
but not until 14 or 15.
Well, Jed's getting up there, isn't he?
He's taller than me, but like I said, that's a low bar.
Like, yeah, your bar is even lower than mine, but not by much, like an inch.
Okay, so back to Sojourner for just a second. So we are operating in the tavern, and a customer named John Dumont offered to buy Belle for $300. That's a significant amount of money. I had read that the barkeep had had a vague notion of freeing her when she was 18, but you had to have all that money to go with her if you did that, and it was all in the distant future. It was kind of a nebulous plan, and oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. That's like a year's worth of income, kind of. That's so it was done. It was done. Belle was sold to this man, this Dumont, and traveled with him to his farm in Newport, which is about 10 miles away from the tavern. And John Dumont is already her fifth master.
This is probably a good time to take a break. And when we come back, we'll hear about what happens at the Dumonts. And we're back. Belle is about 13 years old. She is her full height of 6 feet tall. She's strong, and she's just moved into a new family, the Dumonts.
There were 10 other slaves at this farm and also a group of white servants, mostly maids, housemaids, hired girls is what they were called because this is not Downton Abbey. And like any new hire at any new company, all of the other slaves let her into the ways of the corporation. Mister, he's all right. You do your work, you're okay. He's not a man for anger or loud words or beatings. He just likes to get along. But Mrs. Woo, she is full of fire and you just stay out of her way, which was easy for them to say because part of Belle's new job was to work in the kitchen.
Mrs. Dumont is not a fan of Belle.
Sure enough, micromanaging, fault finding, yelling, also actually telling all of the white hired girls to see if they can, and I quote, grind that Belle down. Gross.
One of those girls that Beckett was talking about, her name was Kate. And for a while, Belle would put the potatoes on to cook. And then when they were done, they were gritty and the water was dirty. And Belle kept getting in trouble for it.
And Belle's like, well, I don't know. Maybe the dirt leaches out or something. I swear to you. I washed them. And so she would wash them extra carefully the next day and put them in. And then she had to go milk the cow. Timing is everything, milking a cow. And she'd come back in, and sure enough, there'd be dirt all in the no matter how hard she scrubbed. The potatoes came back dirty. And 10-year-old daughter of the house, Gertrude, decided to do a stakeout.
Kate got some ashes from the fire and dropped them in the potatoes.
Gertrude told her parents and stopped at least one of the strains of torture in that house. And Belle never forgot it. She felt so grateful.
It was a minor victory, but she knew she had a ally in the house. And Mr. Dumont was kind of an ally too, which puts him in a weird position. She had this really weird attachment to him that was kind of bordering on worship. She just wanted to make him happy.
I am just going to say here, and this is a G-rated podcast, that there are some veiled references to indelicate situations in her later biography at this point. Since Belle never learned to read or write, this narrative, this biography was dictated to someone who wrote it down, who was a quite conservative person, a lady. And so we can imagine the details, I suppose. I am sorry to say they are not at all uncommon. We don't have anything direct, although one source I read actually put forth the theory it was Mrs. Dumont and not Mr. who was involved in sexual abuse of Belle. And that would be something we have not run across before. Neither option is something that should ever be connected to a 13-year-old girl, to anyone.
Mm-mm.
That's all we're going to say about that.
That's more than enough.
For a period of time, Belle tried to cope with her new surroundings like she had at the Neelys. Like, if I'm super good and I work harder and faster than anyone else, I'm going to avoid the harsh treatment. And soon the other slaves really, really resented her. Like, she's super teacher's pet. She made life hard for all of them by tattling.
Her peers were like, slow down. You can't, this is not good. You're making us all look bad.
She was lonely for quite a long time. Even after she modified her ways, it took everyone a while to trust her again. She talked, at this point, to the only friend she had left, the god her mother had told her was always watching, and asked him what I believe is a very logical question. Why don't you stop slavery? Why is this happening? And the man who acted as the slave's preacher had a very thoughtful answer to this, I think. He said that God doesn't like to change evildoers right out. He wants to give them a chance to turn around by themselves. And that he didn't always answer prayers immediately, which was not a good enough answer for me, of course. But
that's exactly the answer that I was thinking in my head when I had heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, it gave her a sense of relief that maybe this God was someone she could tell her troubles to. And so important, especially when you're alone. And she found this little place, a little tiny island in a stream that was hidden by branches and bushes. And in, successive years, she wove little walls out of reeds and things. And it was a genuine little hidey hole on that island, a little waterfall, a little stream. And that is where she talked to her God, who was more like a father figure and a friend than any god that the Christians of the time were praying to. This was more of a personal friend.
Right. Because she didn't have any Christian training.
Well, and so we travel through the years, until one holiday week, which is a holiday I've never actually heard of. 7 weeks after Easter. You may have heard of this holiday as Pentecost, or if you're a reader of Jane Austen era literature, as Whit Sunday. It's one of those words that you just kind of, I'll get you married by Whit Sunday. I don't know what that means. Well, the Dutch word for it is Pinksteren. Well, by now, though, it's been corrupted to the word Pinkster, and it was an established African-American celebration, a week off for real. And you could travel to see relatives who'd been sold away. There was traditional food, a certain kind of sausage, gingerbread. There was hard cider for everybody. It was a drinking festival, dances and music that had a lot in common with West Africa. Lots of drums, lots of clapping, because you still have first-generation captives here that are coming to these Pinkster celebrations and kind of educating their fellow slaves in the ways of the mother country. I just didn't realize how close to Africa these particular people were. Like, some literally had been born there. I was
I know.
surprised.
I know, because usually we talk later, like Civil War, there's been generations. Yeah. It really sounds like a fun celebration. They'd make these huts and they'd all stay on, like, it was like camping. And I think the really coolest thing about this is they took it from the Dutch. It was the Dutch holiday and they kind of appropriated it. I think that's fantastic. And there was like subtle little digs in there about they would mock their masters and things, but it was part of the traditional songs and dances and games. So yeah, it was a big, oh my gosh, the word in my head is hootenanny. No. It was a very, very special week in the lives of these people.
All holiday aside, all the fun drinking and the big bonfire in the woods and everything, no one was the boss of you for that week. If you wanted to work that week, you were paid for it. Yeah.
But them apples.
It was a very exciting time, and I'm thinking probably the only time in their whole lives that a slave could feel like a person with agency into their own lives. And
And
I just,
community, because they all came together. These are people that a lot of times they spend their whole lives, mostly on their farms, not interacting with slaves from other places. So yeah.
so it was maybe during one Pinkster week that Belle met a man named Robert, also known as Catlin's Robert, a man from a nearby farm, and they fell in love. Belle was about 17 years old, and they kept seeing each other after Pinkster was over, but Robert's master freaked out because any babies that were born to a slave mother were the property of the mother's owner. And so Robert's master found him a wife on his own farm. He was supposed to never see Dumont's Belle ever again.
They set up a sting for him and they told him that Belle was sick. So Robert went to her side. But when he got to the house, it was just his owner standing there waiting for him with a rope in one hand. And they beat him right then and there. John Dumont had to get involved because he thought that the treatment of Robert on his property was going to kill the guy. He's like, I don't want your blood shed on my property. You have to go. And he loosened the ropes on him and walked Robert home. But Robert never saw Belle ever again.
I thought that was interesting that Dumont followed Robert home to make sure that Catlin didn't kill him.
Yeah. I hate that we have to put these degrees. He did have some type of compassion.
It's a weird thing I keep running across too. It's like different degrees of horrible, kind of.
I know.
I mean, even the good white people in these stories are not that good.
No, I know. I totally agree.
What a pass you reach when you have to say, well, he's keeping these people like animals in a zoo, but at least he doesn't let people kill other people on his property. So we don't want to fall into the trap that Dumont is an angel. Case in point. Perfect timing.
Mm-hmm.
Dumont assigned Belle a husband from among his other slaves. What could they do? What could they do? He even had an actual preacher marry them. And I had thought that slave marriages had no force of law, really. Like if the owner wanted to change things up, they did. But no, not in New York State. I guess what I was thinking of is, like we all do, slavery in the Deep South. In New York, once a slave couple was married, you couldn't separate them. Yes, and they could transfer property to each other in a will.
How about that?
They were kind to each other. This Tom, that was her husband's name. The love of Tom's own life had been sold, and he had run away to look for her. And he had managed to stay away a month before he was brought back and whipped. And so he certainly understood his wife's sadness, I think. Not an awesome basis to base your marriage on, but they got along okay. And their first child, Diana, was born about a year after the wedding. And I have to say, according to all these sources, old Diana has 3 possible fathers, as far as all my books are concerned. You'll read that it was Robert's baby, definitively, they'll say. You'll read that it's her husband Tom's baby, also definitively. And you'll also read that it is Mr. Dumont's baby.
Yeah.
When Belle was 20 years old, a law was passed that closed that age loophole. So, in 10 years, all slaves over 28 had to be freed on July 4th. Everyone born before 1799. Remember that that deadline she had just missed. That sucked. Now, it was like a light snapped on in Belle's head. 10 years, 10 years, 10 years with glorious freedom at the end. I can do this. And she sort of described it as the feeling she got when she arrived at a Pinkster celebration, but for her life. Like the anticipation, looking forward to freedom. Belle and Tom had 4 more children in these 10 years. Elizabeth, Peter, and baby Sophia, and either Hannah who lived, or Thomas that died, or James that died. It's so crazy. Well, so we've got the 10 years, and at year 8, Dumont told her that if she worked harder than ever for him, he would free her a year early. You know what? And Tom. And I'm going to give you a cabin. How about it? And she took that bet. You are on, Chachi, It's
like, I'd like to have a house of my own where I can be with my family. Another thing she's praying to God for.
And she nearly worked herself to death. She cut her hand pretty badly on a scythe, which is a big, giant knife. And
a big, giant curved knife, yeah.
Yeah, and it really didn't have a chance to heal properly because she just kept driving herself onward. I'm 100% sure it got infected. She was there. She did it. And the deadline passed. And nothing. No word. No keys to the cabin. No congratulations. There's not a folder of paperwork. And so Belle walked in to see Dumont and she confronted him. Okay, have you lost track of time? The time has come. I'm medium respectful right now. And so he weaseled out. He weaseled out of it. And what he told her was, you're hurt. Your hands are hurt. Are you really telling me that you think you did enough work to justify this extra year? When in fact, he had literally been bragging to all and sundry that she did the housework and then did more work in the fields than any man on the premises. Well, the truth is, his crops had been wiped out the previous year. Almost everyone's crops had been by a pest called the Hessian fly. And it was so bad, in fact, that Thomas Jefferson himself had been looking into it. Preachers were saying from the pulpits that this fly was God's punishment for society's sins. This natural disaster is because God's mad at us. Financially, he was in a pickle, this Dumont. And I hope that he had not been playing some sort of sick game with her. I really hope that he meant to up until he couldn't. And my feeling is,
Yeah.
honestly, if he had been honest with her and said, look, the Hessian fly did this thing. I think if she'd been treated like a human and asked for her help, she might have had a better reaction to it. It was more respectful of him to have treated her that way, but instead he had to act like she had failed and put it all on her. And she knew she had not failed. She knew it. She wrote later on that she felt rage just boil up in her when he was talking, but that suddenly, it was all gone. It was more of a feeling of contempt, which, of course, at the time she had no words for. So this is her writing a lot later, like almost power. Belle just walked away from that conversation. But from that moment, she, in her mind, considered herself a free woman.
Hmm. And she did do a little more work for him, thinking, well, I'll just finish, I'll do something else, and then I'm going to go. She spun another 100 pounds of wool, trying to make him satisfied. She prayed, of course. And then finally, God did tell her to just walk away. So one morning before sunrise, she packed up her clothes, wrapped up her youngest baby, Sophia, and did just that. She walked away.
She was trying to work it out. She couldn't take the children with her, really, because by law, they were still slaves for, somewhere between 18 years, 23 more years in the case of some of the little ones. And, she determined she had to take the baby because who was still nursing. Okay, I'm going to work as a free woman to help my family. That's my role. That's what I'm going to do. If she left at night, that would be sneaking. That would be dishonorable. And in fact, I think that's why she finished all that wool. Like, you know what? You are not going to be able to say of me that I left any loose ends. I did the same thing. I quit my job upstairs and I came downstairs and finished my project.
Yeah.
We are pathological in that way, I guess, Belle and I, but I really admire that. It's like no one's going to be able to say to me that I sneaked or that I slacked. I'm going to do this the right way. So if she left during the middle of the day, though, people would notice and they would come after her too soon for this whole scenario to be of any use. And so she determined she's going to wait for the sun to come up like she's on the road because she can get far enough away before anyone notices she's gone that she can put her plan into action. So down the road she went. She headed for the house of a local Quaker man who had once stopped her on the road and told her that God did not intend for her to be in bondage. And I think he meant all the hers, like
Yeah.
not just her. Quakers were the staunchest abolitionists of all, but she remembered him, this guy, and she took it as a sign from God that he would help her, that she remembered him just at the right time. And so she got to his house and he was too sick to help her on his deathbed, you'll read. So perhaps his last worldly act was to direct her to another Quaker family about 4 miles further down the road who might be able to help her.
And this was Isaac and Marie Van Wagener. And in the past, they had helped runaway slaves get to freedom, to get established somewhere else. And, they were like a lot of these Quakers, Beckett's been saying over and over again, they were staunch abolitionists. So they did take Belle and Sophia into their house. They gave her an actual room with a real bed. The first time she slept on a bed.
Mm.
They gave her a job. She was going to be making some money. It sounds like all dreamy, but it wasn't that simple. Dumont did come after her.
Everybody knew about the Quakers. This does not take a great leap of detective work on his part. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and it's a small community. He knows, he's like, well, if she didn't go here, she probably went there.
So when Dumont came to that house and he saw her, he said, well, Belle, you've run away from me. And she goes, no, I didn't. I didn't run away. I walked away because you didn't keep your promise. Yes, this is from her autobiography. And he said, well, you have to go back with me. She said, I won't. And then he said, I'll take the child then. And she said, no, you won't. And that's when the Van Wageners stepped in with their cash.
What the Van Wagner said is they would pay for both Belle and Sophia for the remainder of the year that she was supposed to be working off. And he took the deal. $20 for Belle and $5 for Sophia. She was free. It was in her head, it was in her heart, and after they exchanged that cash, it was in her life.
I keep thinking that I can't psychoanalyze Dumont from here, but he probably just saved himself the trouble he was sensing with this scenario because things had changed. $20 is better than having to chase her all over the country.
And Belle telling him no. That didn't happen. She was always obedient, and he could see that wasn't the same Belle that he had, been the master of for all those years.
She lived happily with the Van Wageners, who I don't think ever legally freed her exactly, but functionally she was treated like a free woman, very respectfully, very kindly. That's novel enough. She listened to Bible reading. In this house is where she became a committed Christian during her time with them. But then Mr. Van Wagener came home with some horrible news. Dumont had sold Peter, Belle's only son, sold him to a man named Dr. Gedney, who was taking him to England. My heart. He was 5 or 6 years old only. That is bad enough, but it gets worse. The doctor, who was going to go to England, realized that 6 years old is too young to be a body servant, you think? And so he just left him with his brother in New York and didn't take him to England at all. And the worst news of all, they had sold him to their sister Eliza's new husband as kind of like a wedding present for Eliza, a little piece of home to go with the new bride to her new home in Alabama. It's the Deep South. It's every slave's nightmare. There's no Freedom Day at 28 for anybody. And Belle could never get him back from there. And she went to the Dumonts. A characteristic response. Mr. said, hey, I don't know anything about it. I thought he was going to England, frankly, blah, blah, blah. And Mrs. Dumont said, don't you have enough children to worry about still? All this fuss for one little... And then, listeners, she used the N-word. She went to the new bride's mother and said, I want my child back. And the response was to laugh and say, yeah, I want mine back too. Them's the breaks. I don't want my child living in Alabama either, but that's where her new husband's taking her. So get out of my house.
But she had the law on her side. There was a New York law that said that no minor child could be sold into a slave-owning state. So Belle knew that this wasn't just ethically wrong, it was legally wrong too.
But you can always count on the Van Wageners. They have a network, and they have
That's right.
They're brainful. And they made some plans. Okay. Since Peter was the property of that husband who had lived in Alabama, the sellers had committed a crime. It carried a 14-year sentence or a large fine, and the slave in question would be freed upon his master's conviction. This was high stakes for both sides. You know what I mean? She won the case. That's the point. She won the case. She was one of the first Black women in the United States to ever win a case in court, especially against a white man. Are you glad she didn't know that going in, though? That's too much pressure.
That was totally working to her benefit, because if she had known what kind of stakes she was up against, I don't know that she would have done it.
Like people starting a new podcast.
Yeah, that's
right. Who have no idea what's ranged up against them. Yeah.
It's like, let's get a microphone. I have a computer. We can, yeah.
So yes, there is power in not understanding. So the constable was sent to serve a notice to appear with Peter, serve it to a man named Solomon Gedney, who had sold Peter to his sister's husband. They served the papers to the wrong man, and Gedney slipped out of town. Now, unbeknownst to Belle, Gedney's lawyers had basically said, dude, you better go get that boy from Alabama and bring him back. They're looking to make some scapegoats around here because of this law. So close to the Freedom Day, they want to slap some wrists, and it's not looking good for you. I think you better get the boy and bring him back. Well, Belle doesn't know that. In the spring, here comes Mr. Gedney, and guess who he's got with him? Yes, Peter. The order was given to the right man, and he posted bond, but she was told she'd had to wait 3 more months for the next session of court, and this was almost too much to bear. A passing stranger, a random man on the road, pointed her to a man named Lawyer Domain's house. He's your man. He can do it. You badger him until he takes your case. And for the rest of her life, Belle thought that this man, the man on the road, was an angel sent from God. If not God or Jesus himself, that this man was an angel, because there is no reason a random white man she'd never seen before would ask about her case and point her to the exact man that could fix it.
Well, I think that's a pretty solid argument that he was sent from God, at least.
Well, he sure did, this Lawyer Domain. He returned from the courthouse with the news that Peter wanted to stay with his master. What? Everyone met in the judge's chambers to hash this out, and Peter was hanging on to Solomon Gedney's legs and saying he didn't want to leave, and he was crying, and that lady's not my mother. And evidently, the judge saw this had all been rehearsed. So, if Peter had been a better child actor, she may never have gotten him back at all.
No.
But she did. As soon as Mr. Gedney left, Peter told everybody that his master had threatened the worst whipping of his life if he didn't say what master had told him to say.
He was already covered in scars and scabs from his previous beatings. You know, he had been beaten right up until the time he's getting in that courtroom to drive the point home that, yeah, there's bad things that are going to happen if you don't tell them what I want you to tell them.
She could not believe it. He had a scar on his cheek. He had marks on his forehead. His back was an oozing mess of old and new scars. His shirt was stuck to the old scabs, and she just cried and cried. It's like, what kind of a monster does this to a 6-year-old child? And she, I think, forgot her Quaker religious training and went back to her old ways of talking to God like a friend or a father figure, and she yelled into the air, God, render unto these who have done this double the torments. Her mother's heart was breaking. Like, was there no one nice to you? Was there no one? And Peter told her he used to crawl under the porch after a beating, and Miss Eliza, this is the new bride, would squeeze under there and put medicine on his wounds in secret in the middle of the night. Now, so what does this tell you about Eliza's own life? The situation she'd probably found herself in.
Yeah.
Not very good. Well, not very long afterward, the news came that Eliza's husband, Peter's old master, the monster, had beaten his wife to death.
That's the sound of that sinking in. Yeah.
Yeah, he was committed to an insane asylum. And Belle felt responsible and fell to her knees like, oh, no, that was too much, God. I didn't mean for it to be that much. Like, she kind of felt like, oh, no, I've called down a curse. That's the power of that kind of religion. Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what she asked for. Yeah.
Yes.
She she's right. It's not so compassionate, you know. You can just to I think I left the class practice when I first started to work. Because it's something up and into trouble, getting into great amounts of trouble. Scenario. It was some pink star, and the couple of someone uses the picture. It's that it's in her conversation and speak. I used to swear and it's turned out the trans guy coming to the places. So they can't figure out. She don't know a couple of things. Just can't manage. And suddenly it's what the hits her. It's never come out of this fancy and she passes out. It's just a mild faith, and I'm saying not to faith. And again, for the street like this, but you don't just stay here. And I can't go out and I can just come around and you have this one. You can see it. I'm dressed like I can't afford you. Said the woman. Said the man. Girl. That's nice. Yeah. Exactly. And you know, future was the most possible currently. I'm just you can like you people together. You could not excuse me, I can that. Contentious. What's this? Narrative. This couple because not particularly quite the street as much as they could. Yes, that's the thing when local girls are called by the same thing. I'm in New York. So maybe so respected, you know, the street the internet and people cannot not for anything. Points. It's not like that's actually people have many consider my money. To contribute that work. Did she put on like cloud? He doesn't have take him out of the house. Practiced.
You could. Yes. Assassination and that's her character. She's trying to be clear and makes that's what's something that's being carried her with me. So she needs to go there. And times that I was others. Weakness. Situations around the church. Anti-Christians. Because that's not what he thought was her next pastors. She was kind of like a figure. I have no history. She had things. That's there. What you go with it was my the church that was running to preach. And that's what I could even I was left her. She had to have her custody. She realizes that people was stuck there with what was he couldn't actually he kept getting in trouble. He had to say I was still classes to become a son of a big correct trades well, but actually stop going. So he was trying to be the he would what she just was this I don't finish it when he was 18 and it was the shame coming back. I was what experience so even to be somebody had to really for her I think it's class 29. This is very logical. That was her the Bible. So a verse for I go search, but I can't find a good one. You have to help me. Sojourner Truth. That she's hoping to have she wants to know he's a preacher. She wants to preach. And then go to some preacher there and spread the word. Spread out it. I think when she was talking about that, actually, it's neglected then. Last swim,
You know, so that you got so ah, it speaks to me. It would draw the people of the and kind of overtook the group and started and that's scary. And I got the book myself, it's not going to be a shared thing. But I just like I my side. So she feeling and she had people and she speaks to them like people. And they turned not in a way, but in a way. And they were enthralled to know about to her so that she could give her speech and she was singing and she was singing so much she was getting tired of it. And I said, just more. So she gave them more and they get on their way and hopefully comes to as soon as concerned. Like he's the hands of the ship's spouse and she was just talking about and she was mesmerizing. So she that just people beat with the drink everyone was just and everyone was just saying it's just sort of like body noise. So it's I can give it because it's not stuff. I think it will be moving. And it's not if you just them to realize particular decisions they would impact the thoughts on it. And not just lots of things like also journals, but this music is. That's not the come for all you can filter because it's difference. I love that. Yeah, but actually being able to receive it. No, it's supposed to keep probably share it. And there are some people who are struggling from the because the methods of getting around in words. A very question. I'm just
I'm saying this was
No. That's what the group called them. Into the message. I think they're just one person. I was working on Jesus was coming. He's coming back soon. And the person says the rest of you are going to spend eternity now. You can look at that and her message was so much more loving. Something but the people are grateful. Sometimes like suppose you could do of the similarities.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly. Just after sex. Actually. Technically work harder, but even technically it's different. It's not we have to get characters at the end of our the kind of take our message to a different level where actually we talked about we took all of it from journalistic and whatever it's message instead of effective preaching. Okay, but it's and
human rights is right and there's not really CD players anymore. Mm. And as you talk about parents, it's all about the purpose and everything is going around. It's such a good one for the people that they was into the joy program. It's a second chance to be with her. It's just funny. It's just Johnny the partner the books. Started to pay her visit. She has a little house at last. Her own little house. It's over kicking her in. You know, sites. Sometimes later, I just don't think that happened. I'm angry. In this speech,
I love Sojourners. That's them. It's like, I'm not speaking that the way she speaks, it would probably not happen. Uh, women's rights. It's probably version. It's not here. Is that speech was given, and it's it just doesn't sound like the type of speech that should be given. It's something that has been edited. That's what I'm going to say. This is the strength of the kind of correspondence. So, look at me. But I'm keeping we had to find I could hear me. What's this to say? You're one of us. I'm 2 months ago. I'm speak. It's probably the right speech. It's just completely. Everybody. Again. Speaking. And I agree with you. The beach, the speech, the big speech,